is not great. Okay? Free me. I'm about to be seemingly made an example of.
Well, we speculated that this might happen. We called for it to happen, but it looks like Hasan Piker and the leftist influencers and organizations who took that now infamous propaganda tour to Cuba a couple of months ago are now under federal investigation, both from the DOJ and Treasury Department, for potentially violating multiple U.S. national security laws in the process of their supposed humanitarian aid trip that was clearly just apologetics and arguably material support for the communist Cuban government, which is actually illegal under U.S. law. And if this plays out, it is a positive step in cracking down against the networks of organized communism in this country that I have said, especially since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, needs to be a top priority of the Trump administration. I understand it is difficult. I do not attack them because woke judges stand in the way, and our legal system in a lot of ways is kind of structurally designed to defend these people. But clearly there is a network of organized communism in this country. Oftentimes it is translating to terrorism and violence out in the streets. And by the way, it's also the case, as we've identified in the past, a lot of this stuff is being financed and sponsored by foreign actors, which maybe potentially is the legal way you can bring this stuff down. We've identified in the past how a lot of the Communist Party organizations who show up and lead No Kings protesters are literally just being financed by people over in China. Same situation over in Cuba. And so, yes, if you can use national security laws to bring what is clearly a foreign actor in some way or another down, that is good news. Now, I'm going to address immediately the comments that we are inevitably going to get, which is that, oh, we hear this stuff all the time and it goes nowhere. Well, I get that, and I'm not promising you anything, but what I'd also point out is that this stuff objectively just does take time. I know the moment something happens, you say he should be in jail the next day, but I'd point out, especially after Pam Bondi was replaced by Todd Blanche, we have seen some positive developments. For example, the Somali fraud situation where Quality Leering Center, we don't hear anything about that for months, but now guess what's happening? They're being raided, I believe indicted if I remember there correctly, but nonetheless, what was happening was behind the scenes. The federal government's building a case and this process just does take time. So the fact that the investigation is happening, I'm not going to say promise you is going to go anywhere. I'm not saying Hasan Piker is going to be in jail and we need to keep the pressure up that this is what we want, but at the same time it should be celebrated as a positive development. And let's not get so pessimistic that nothing ever happens. How about let's see what happens? Okay, so I know that people have been led along by a lot of clickbait on other channels that, by the way, we do not engage in, but I'm telling you this is what's happening, and we'll break it down and talk about where it could lead. Okay, so let's get into all of that. First though, do us a favor, if you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, to briefly recap where we are. So, the federal law on Cuba basically says you can't go there for simple tourism purposes. Generally speaking, you're not allowed to go there and provide direct support to the Cuban government. But the loophole that very often left-wing activists use is it is legal to give quote-unquote humanitarian aid. So you can go on a humanitarian trip, you can go on a trip related to journalism, things like that. But basically, you can go there and, as Code Pink and Hasan Piker, for example, did, deliver some small menial amounts of food aid or something, and then the whole rest of the time, you're just on a socialist vacation. You're staying in 5-star hotels, you're taking state propaganda tours from the government, but you tell the US, hey, I was there to do humanitarian aid. The problem is, of course, in the modern day of social media, that when you film and document everything that you're doing, and it clearly does appear to be the case that I think in a lot of ways they were providing direct material support for the Cuban government. By the way, Hasan Piker claimed, oh, I was only allowed to stay in that 5-star hotel, but some people were pointing out the opposite, that actually when it comes to lodging in hotels in Cuba, you're not allowed to stay in places where the money directly goes back to the Cuban government, because again, we're going to repeat this, it is illegal to provide direct material support to the Cuban government. So it could actually be the case that while Hasan thought he was following the law, he was completely violating it. So there's a lot of questions here. I'm not here to say anything definitive. I'm not the expert. I'm sure these people have plenty of lawyers that tried to work all that stuff out, but I did pose the question at the time. It does appear that what they did over in Cuba could be illegal under US laws, the sanctions, it violated the embargo, things like that, right? So that's basically where we are, and that's why I was calling the federal government absolutely needs to investigate this and what's going on. And by the way, maybe a separate question entirely, but how much is the Cuban government or Cuban state actors just directly funding left-wing NGOs, many of which also took the propaganda trip? Is that some type of dark money rabbit hole that's going? And if that's the case, and they're illegally registered, they're not declaring themselves to be foreign actors, or that's a violation of certain sanctions, these are all things that potentially need to be looked into and shouldn't be ignored, which is why I'm happy that basically the Treasury Department is involved in this investigation too, because effectively what they're doing is auditing the finances of the left. And when you take note of how many, not just people like Hasan Piker, but also leftist organizations, I should say, that very often you see at these protests, went on this trip. Code Pink is a prime example. If not mistaken, they also do take some money from Chinese-backed sources. If you can nail these people as hostile foreign actors, that's very good. That's a very good development. And so at the very least, auditing their finances is the first step, guys. Okay. So yeah, you can comment, oh, nothing's going to happen to them. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm just pointing out, if something is going to happen to them, which usually the left gets away with everything, but if something does, this is the start. And it certainly says something that Hasan Piker is basically stating publicly, yeah, I don't think this is good news for me, right? His statement's not all that defiant, which seems to me also to indicate that maybe he got some legal advice and he says, oh, I might actually be in trouble here. We'll find out. But here are those details. So federal officials have served subpoenas to Marxist political influencer Hasan Piker and Code Pink co-founder Susan Benjamin. I believe that's the girl we showed doing all those videos, Cuba is seized, whatever they were saying, right? Bloqueo no, the stupid chant. As part of a wider investigation into whether U.S. organizations and leaders violated U.S. laws and sanctions in supporting Cuba's communist regime, according to Fox News Digital. Now, Piker and Benjamin, you may remember, are among those caught in a federal inquiry into whether the activists who traveled to Cuba in March violated U.S. sanctioned laws through the financing, coordination, or delivery of goods to Cuba, including potential contacts with Cuban government personnel or entities on the island, which it does appear, if not mistaken, I think Hasan Piker sat down directly and was doing interviews with some top people from the communist regime. I doubt he's the only one there, right? So clearly, I mean, let's not play stupid. It was a lot more than just a charity mission. It was just a direct attempt to go help out the communists. The only question is, legally, can we nail them for that, for violating that law? Because obviously it's what they were doing. So is their stupid loophole excuse about humanitarianism enough? That's what we're going to see. That's what we're going to find out with the financial and civil and criminal investigation. So there you have that. The administrative subpoenas were sent to the pair by the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control. These subpoenas are requests for information, and they seek financial, logistical, and communications information revolving around trips the two widely bragged about making to the island nation with delegations of Nuestra America convoy from a global network of communist sympathizers, activists, and influencers who brought supplies to the country's ruling Communist Party of Cuba, according to sources familiar with the matter. And by the way, if I were to guess, there probably is something you could find them on here, because historically, I've actually known about this Cuba thing for years, because growing up in LA, there were certain people I was around that I would just say, I knew who did this, and I was always suspicious of them, right? So I've always known about this kind of process. And in every single case, anyone you knew who went on this humanitarian trip to Cuba in a city full of communists, always, every single time, they weren't there to do humanitarian work, right? So every single time, these are far left communist Marxist people. And so, my point in saying that is that historically, nobody batted an eye. Right? You went to Cuba, you came back, talked about it as a vacation, even though formally that's not what it was supposed to be, and how amazing Cuba was. But, I think the reason I'm saying that is perhaps it could be possible that because leftists have gotten away with breaking laws for so long and nobody doing anything about it, my honest hope in this case is they slipped up, right? There's a loophole here. There's something where we can nail them that, hey, you broke U.S. law in the process of doing that, and this whole network of organized communism comes down. Because This shady Cuban propaganda trip thing has been a thing for many decades, and in every single case, people in some way or another are sort of at least violating the publicly stated intent of what they're doing. And I know people have done that firsthand, okay, and they're all shady. But anyways, the investigation is part of a broader effort by officials at Treasury, State Department, and the Justice Department. So this could turn into a criminal situation to curb malign foreign influence operations inside the United States, particularly activities tied to support for political violence, extremist movements, or acts that the U.S. government classifies as terrorism. The scrutiny reflects growing concern among federal authorities and lawmakers over whether foreign actors and aligned organizations are attempting to shape American political discourse, mobilize activists, sow discord, and normalize rhetoric that could encourage violence or undermine U.S. national security interests. Well, that's already happening. Okay, that's well established. Every time we talk about No Kings protesters, by the way, we're like, oh, so this group is financed by China. That one, that Neville Singman guy, I think his name is. He's heavily involved in this type of stuff. Actually, it's mentioned here. According to the Fox News digital investigation, this guy Singman has pumped $278 million into nonprofit groups that have pushed pro-China, pro-Cuba, anti-U.S. narratives and street protests for over a decade. And apparently this guy is married to the co-founder of Code Pink. So keep in mind, that Singman guy is the Chinese-based billionaire who finances a bunch of international communism, including No Kings protesters. Code Pink, same organization that went to Cuba. This stuff runs deep. These people undeniably are foreign actors who that type of behavior would not be allowed to happen in other countries, right? Do you think that do you think that China or Cuba, for that matter, would allow a bunch of Americans to go over there and, organize hostile protests meant to overthrow their system? I don't think that's the case. But anyways, so it goes on to state this a lot, but I guess the Singman Network was also heavily financing the Nuestra American Convoy and all this stuff. Organizations also included the Democratic Socialists of America. Yes, there is effectively a big, gigantic money laundering network going on the organized left. It's only a question of whether we can bring it down. So this undeniably, guys, is a very good first step. This Fox News digital investigation has identified 145 nonprofit activist groups with $1 billion in collective revenues that Justice and Treasury officials are investigating as part of a wider influence campaign by Cuba's communist regime and other foreign actors. And so, yeah, obviously not surprising. The supposed grassroots leftists, right? Communism is about what, guys? It's poor workers rising up against the capitalists, but we're funded in a billion-dollar network of a bunch of capitalists. Yeah, very interesting how this stuff goes. But it's in the same sense how these people pretend to be American, right? They pretend to be or advocating for anything related to the interests of America remotely, and we know that's not the case. I mean, they're literally just like hostile, anti-American foreign actors, and for whatever laws we have to use to bring them down, this stuff should not be allowed to happen. So there you effectively get the story. It's just an investigation at this point. Subpoenas are coming down. But for whatever reason, I want you to take a listen to Hasan Piker's public reaction to this, because he seems to indicate he could actually be in real trouble, which hopefully is the case, right? I'm going to use that as my metric to say, okay, is this real? Was this performative? Did Hasan Piker really screw up? This guy's not the smartest, by the way, not the brightest. He doesn't tend to tie up loose ends when he's collaborating with foreign regimes and things like that. But here's what Hasan had to say.
Is not great. Okay. I mean, it's bullshit, but still not great that, they're after your boy. They're up my ass. And I'll obviously get into it right now. I'll tell you all about it, but let me blast off real quick. We will free you, brother. Yeah, free me. Free me. Free me. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I'm about to be seemingly made an example of.
Yeah, so take that reaction as you will, but he doesn't exactly sound too confident. They don't sound like the words of a guy who knows he'll prevail. He's innocent. He did absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, he seems to be indicating that the Trump administration's prepared to make an example out of him, which we can only hope is the case, okay? Let's hope in this case the Trump administration is just as big and scary as leftists make them out to be, because, you know, you hear all this stuff about how, oh, well, you know, he's using the government to do a totalitarian crackdown against his political opponents. And in reality, what is it actually like? They're accusing him of taking Stephen Colbert off the air or something like that, even though he didn't. But even if he did, oh yeah, biggest deal on the wall, Stephen Colbert and his crappy show that no one watches. That, can you believe what he did? This is unprecedented. But, you know, one can only hope in this case, he actually starts using the government for real to shut down organized communism, right? And that's what we've been hoping happens. As I've said, I understand why it's not that easy. Okay, it's not as simple as people think, because you see how the judges are, you see how the legal system is, but we have to try. Certainly we have to try. And I'm sure they're going to run around then and say, oh, this is weaponization of government. Yeah, who started that though? You know? And let's actually properly define, why do I find it so important that we view organized communism in this country as a sincere national security and terroristic threat, which it is, and shut it down? Is because I know what these people are going to do if they take power over us. Okay, so we can't have this mindset of, oh, well, but it's a slippery slope, because if we do it to them, which they've already done it to us, but if we do it to them, they're going to do it to us. Their whole publicly stated memorandum is they're going to do it to us. That's why I'm saying we can't let these people win, okay? Because I understand what's going to happen to all of us if these people are allowed to win. That's why I view it to be of the supreme utmost urgency that we quash the problem we have in our country right now before it gets any worse. And why I say that the left is the greatest threat to this country and is the greatest threat to you. And in some cases, elections are a life and death issue, okay? Because we see what these people do. We see how they act. And, you know, I'm not here to shed tears. Even if, oh, Hasan wants to claim, they took me down on a technicality. Dude, you knew exactly what you were doing, okay? You were not there to do humanitarian aid. You were there to do apologetics and try to provide support for the communist government. You may have tried to figure out all the legal loopholes you could get around it, and then maybe you screwed up, but the whole point still remains. You were there to do, your intent was still there to do something that does break US law. You were just trying to find all the loopholes to get away with it. I have no sympathy for you, dude. If you screwed up, and in that case, you go down anyway, because, you know, you forgot one loophole technicality that actually you didn't manage to close or properly fill, okay? Communism is the greatest threat to human civilization itself that we face. It needs to be legally, in a legal manner, be treated as such. So there you go. All right. Good news. We'll see where it goes. Let's hope it does go somewhere. But I'm optimistic to at least find out our federal government has not forgotten about all these people that went and collaborated with a hostile government that is against us and is communist and maybe broke a bunch of laws in the process. So there you go, guys. There's the news for now. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you were new, and until next time, God bless and peace.